Welcome back to the flagship Celtic here weekly podcast. It's Declan, joined by Quinny, double trouble. No Hollywood film stars this week, Quinny, so we're going to batter on. It was good to be joined last week by Gianni. How's your week been? But we're slowly edging towards domestic football returning, but how's it been?
It's been great, buddy. Getting all the Celts through into the knockout round of the World Cup was an unexpected delight for... the World Cup's been funny, but anyway, no, my week's been great because seeing all the boys getting through into the last 16 was unexpected. And like we were just chatting about before coming on there, like Celtic, it's been a mad busy, like, I don't know if it's 10 days or 2 weeks, but so much has happened that, I'm sure we'll be getting into today. But yes, it's been a great week and I'm very much looking forward to, because on the horizon now is the return. We can now kind of just about see it on the calendar when the games are going to start coming back in. And yeah, but a great week.
Yeah, it's you said there, the World Cup has been strange. I don't know if anybody would have predicted, Japan being in a group with Germany and Spain getting to that last 16. The USA, some people had tipped, Wales to kind of progress just due to it likely being Gareth Bale's last tournament. And then you've got, that could be a World Cup tournament. The guy's a machine. I wouldn't be surprised to see him at the Euros if they get there, but that's a different matter. But as you say, Quinny, 4 Celts managed to get the last 16. That was a great achievement. It's great for the club financially, as well as Jeremy Frimpong will be another one that we're actually receiving money from, and he's progressed even further, as Netherlands are going to go up against Argentina in this quarter-final, which should be a really tasty game. Looking forward to watching that. Yesterday, though, but we're recording this on the Thursday, yesterday felt weird because there was no football, didn't it? Because I've been so used to, in the early stages of this World Cup, you were up in the morning early. I better watch what I say here because I know Craig watches us back in the edit and I was working at the time, but he knows the football was on in the background. I know he was doing it too. But the football was on in the background and it was handy, 10, 1, 4, 7. That was your day sorted. And then even when I get to match day 3 and there was only 2 games on, it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? See 2 games on, 4 games on, 2 different times of the day, you know what I mean? But I thought, what am I going to do? And then yesterday, no football, and I was like, what do I do with myself here? And today's another one. So it's been strange with that, but Juranovic is the only guy left in it. Just on those 4 players, to me, probably out the 4th, Quinny, the one I've been most impressed with was probably Aaron Moy, because he played a lot of game time, not as much as Juranovic. I don't think Juranovic has played every single minute so far for Croatia at this World Cup. We knew what the package was with CCV. He only got 1 game. It was an important game. It helped the US progress to the last 16. And obviously, Dyson scores against Croatia in the last 16. It doesn't lead to anything. We'll come on to him. But Aaron Moy, quick word on him. Impressed by his World Cup?
Yeah, overall, he's definitely... He's definitely increased his reputation within Celtic fans in this World Cup for sure. I don't think any Australia fans were terribly surprised by what he gave. Maybe they were surprised to, he managed to do it across the whole group stages and they progressed, But the thing about being a midfielder in that kind of situation as well, for us who are really yet to properly learn what the man's all about, is he's right at the coalface in that centre midfield position in a team that is banking in and playing the low block, as they say, and parking the bus and whatever. So when a midfielder's put in that position, you really do see a lot of their different attributes getting brought out to the top, what they're good at and what they're not good at. And I think overall Celtic fans were probably watching Moy and then leaving those matches thinking he can do much more than I thought he could. So yeah,
absolutely.
I would go along with that.
Yeah, and you're a further Quinny. Australia is going to play a very different style of football to ourselves. They came up against opposition that are going to be completely different from what we face on a regular basis domestically. But I think even a lot of people are probably looking at Aaron Moy, who we know arrived in the summer late in terms of transfers. We know arrived in having not had a pre-season properly just due to the COVID situation in China, which is still ongoing just now in terms of, harsh lockdowns and whatever else that led to football being cancelled and etc., etc. And that's kind of led to him having to build up those minutes to get into this World Cup. He did that. I think I said on here before, it was 20 appearances before he headed off to the World Cup for Celtic, which was quite surprising, I think, for all of us to see. But it's almost as if people are kind of saying, even though he's going to, I don't know if he actually is going to take part in the pre-season training pre-season, second part of the season camp in Portugal. It's because we're breaking this up kind of into 2 parts this season, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's almost as if he's going to use those World Cup matches as a kind of precursor for the second part of the season, using that as his pre-season, and he might be up to the speed where he's quite happy now, which is exciting news when you consider that Callum McGregor's going to be coming back into that Celtic midfield as well.
Totally. And I think you make a great point there, because what Moy does for Australia, like, I think, again, I found myself saying this and I've heard other people saying the same thing, is we've been playing him a bit more in that kind of attacking mid job. I think he only actually played one game for us in the McGregor role. And it is different opposition. St Mirren, was it?
Yeah. St Mirren, and everybody was tearing their hair out with him that day.
Yeah.
Obviously, Aaron wasn't tearing his head out
so he's done that already.
Yeah, I think he's done that already.
For sure. But it is a totally different kettle of fish playing for us, you know. So the manager's tried to get the best out. You know, the manager knows him better than anyone, I would suggest. Absolutely. At this point, you know. Yeah. So he's been trying to put him into that more attacking position. And, you know, for the second half of the season, because we all know the manager well enough at this stage where there is like 3 or 4 substitutions that are so mechanical and strategic for the team that as long as it isn't, you know, something very unusual happening, we'll make 2 subs in midfield, and we'll make probably 2 subs in the forward line. And in the 5th sub, it will probably depend on yellow cards and fitness and minutes for somebody on the bench and that kind of thing. So Moy and Turnbull, for example, we're probably going to see them feature in every match, although start very little. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it'll be very interesting to see in the second half of the season, along with somebody else like Abelgard that, you know, we've been talking about on here, should be a second half of the season player. That we do end up with this. We should have really now in the second half of the year two strong sets of midfield threes, which for the sort of football we are looking to play will be fantastic when that's fully up and running and all of them are at match tempo.
And that's it. You've got, you know, cup games. Probably note the game against Kilmarnock in the Via Play Cup. Get that right, because it's no longer the Premier Sports Cup. And you've got your Scottish Cup tie against Morton. You know, these are opportunities which the manager will rotate in. The schedule, although tough, maybe not as grueling as that kind of October to mid-November period, but it'll still be tough. Will still be, you know, there's still a lot of midweek football at the weekends. I imagine I asked you last week about this. Will he rotate? We both agreed that he will rotate at points, and he'll want to have that balance in there. And then it's just hoping you don't have any further injuries in midfield. And, you know, it's a rotational basis that everybody's fit, and you've got 6 players kind of there to choose from, as you say, Quinny. And you've also got Haksabanovic that we know can drop into that role. So really, you've got kind of 7 players there. I know Scott Robertson again is away with the team to Portugal. I guess you put his hat in that mix for midfielders. But just to kind of close in our World Cup chat, I know it's not everybody's favourite topic. I know there's people who, you know, not fans of international football. They just like the green and white hoops. Juranovic, what kind of chance you give them in this next game? I know he's going to be up against a foe in Vinicius, who he's already faced this season. Yeah. Brazil, to me, look like the best team in the tournament so far. I really hope that comes back to bite me, because I do have Argentina. That was my stake at the start of this World Cup, but Brazil look like the team to stop for me just now. Could this be a game that Juranovic just knows he has to perform in? Because it leads us into transfer talk around him. The Atletico Madrid, I think the news broke yesterday that Atletico would be sending scouts to watch him in this game against Brazil. And then I think this morning it came out from a journalist who's quite kind of in the know with this stuff, a newspaper, and that Atletico were really keen in the player. So just around Juranovic in this game against Brazil, and even in his World Cup performance so far, Quinny?
I think he's definitely covered himself overall in glory, I would say, this season, because again, it's quite a different proposition. Like we spoke about it going into the World Cup, like Juranovic is playing in a normal back four and he's doing the normal right back job, which he's done his whole career. He's not doing some of the more intricate stuff that we're asking. And I think that's
João Cancelo.
Exactly, yeah. He's not been Cancelo. So he's been able to, you know, just be the best right back he possibly can be. And like, is Brazil probably, if Brazil were to look at this whole round of quarterfinals, Croatia's probably one of the teams they would want to have they would have wanted to avoid. Of course, the tree's all predetermined, but Brazil's only kind of like chink in their armour or weakness is in midfield. You know, if you've watched Brazil in this World Cup so far, they do just leave Casemiro in there, and then it's everyone else abandons ships and attacks. So if they do try and play Croatia in that sense, like Modric, Kovacic, Brozovic, Pasalic, you know, the list goes on. They've got lots of guys that will play across 90 and 120 minutes. So I think if there is a team that will cause Brazil a banana peel, because I don't think the French midfield is up to much. I think the English midfield is very good. Argentina is okay. You know, so anyway, I think if there is a team that could cause Brazil a wee banana slip, it could be Croatia. And I didn't actually know that, and I've actually normally got my finger on the pulse with Atletico Madrid, but I didn't know they were coming back in. It's not a huge surprise because the boy Molina that they did sign over, Juranovic, he's been bombed out the Argentina team. He's not been great, and he's not been bad either, but he's not been great in La Liga. And they're just about to get a wad of money for selling Matías Cunha to Wolves for like 30 million. So, yeah, that could be a great move if that comes off for all involved.
Again, you know, but we go back to this move, and the reported fee is 10 million plus, which I think is a nonsense at this point in time because, you know, in the summer we were told Celtic were preparing to listen, and there's a difference between preparing to listen to bids at 15 million and accept bids at 15 million pounds. Complete difference. Celtic were preparing to listen to bids 15 million and up, which means 15 million isn't just okay, that's fine, we'll shake hands and the deal's done. We said last week with Gianni, and he agreed on this, that Celtic with Juranovic, we will get onto Giakoumakis later, are completely in control of both players. Juranovic is contracted to Celtic until 2026. Celtic have power in this, Quinny, and that's a real good thing. And if you're negotiating with a team like Atletico Madrid, you know, there's a lot of scope there because you know what kind of team you're up against. It's not as if it's a two-bob bit outfit coming in from, you know, this is a top La Liga side that's interested in him, and they're sending scouts to watch him. It's evident there, you know, and Celtic have real scope to try and push these numbers up, and a good performance against Brazil, and we'll do that. But I think so far, as you say, he's did very well, and there's no reason why, you know, coming out the Champions League, we hoped that would increase player value. Maybe that's not happened just due to our results in it, but certainly with some of them at the World Cup, if you're wanting to add a few numbers on to fees, I don't see any reason why not to.
No, for sure. Yeah, I'd be quite hopeful we could get, into the teens at least with add-ons and such, you know, but also the kind of flip side to that as well is if you are the bidding club, you know that we've bought a backup already and you know how much we've spent on it and you know how much we've spent on a Juranovic. But I make you quite right. It's very different to us selling Christopher Ayer to Brentford or selling Stuart Armstrong at Southampton, who are like moneyball teams, you know, where it's all about buying it. You know, with those clubs, you're going to get probably not as much up front and maybe big extensions on the back end. Whereas Atletico Madrid are a team you could probably get both sides of that fence well looked after on a deal.
Absolutely. So it's one to keep an eye on at this point in time. Again, he's still currently a Celtic player. I would prefer that to be the case for, you know, as long as possible. But with the arrival of Alistair Johnson, I think people are just putting the bits of the jigsaw together, Quinny, and thinking, you know, bringing in a fullback like Johnson, who typically plays the right-hand side. It's likely that Jura, either in January or in the summertime, will be for the Ofsky. But, you know, with that in mind, you know, going so far in this World Cup, it's going to be Ralston for Aberdeen. And again, that isn't a concern at all, because I think Tony Ralston's had a fairly decent season for Celtic so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually put a video out on my channel yesterday, so that would be Wednesday to anyone that's watching this. And I threw out there, what if, and this is just something when it comes to the right back situation, like you say, with transfers, if we're going to hold out for a good fee, maybe we don't sell Juranovic, you know, and then who do we sell then? It would probably be, you know, basically what I would want to get your opinion on, Declan, is like, is it easier to sell Ralston for 4 million than it is to sell Juranovic for 15? And then you keep Juranovic, who's a World Cup quarter-finalist, keep him in his prime for 2 or 3 seasons with us, you know, makes our team better, as well as having Alistair Johnson.
I think the manager's priority will always be to try and have that kind of crop of homegrown players in and around the club. But I think he knows exactly what he gets from Tony Ralston. He's a player also that is happy to be part of the squad, like a few other guys. That'll, you know, go into that that conversation we're going to have around Giakoumakis later on in the show. But in terms of Tony Ralston, the manager knows what he gets from him. He's a very honest player, I think, and I think he's the type of guy we'd like having around the building. He's still fairly young in terms of football player terms, Tony Ralston,
Totally.
so there's still probably a bit of development to go in his game. Whereas even though, Josip's contracted until 2026, which is 4 years away at this point in time, just less than 4 years away, it's a case of coming off the back of a World Cup. He's had a strong World Cup until now. If he has a good performance against Brazil, it's the right time for me, in my opinion, to try and sell him, because the value of the player probably isn't going to get any high. He's going to have another year on his age, and then that'll start to drop a wee bit. So for me, I think in the whole scale of things, even though Josip Juranovic's much better footballer than Tony Ralston, I think there's still development to go in Ralston, and is the type of player that you want involved in your squad as a whole, because you know what you're going to get from him. Would you agree with that, Quinny?
Yeah, totally. I just thought it was something that I think we're all writing off the fact that it's definitely Juranovic is getting sold. And it just kind of cropped into my mind as well, what if we keep the better player and we sell the one? And again, there is a very strong argument that Ralston is the stronger of the two in actual fact as well. But like you've mentioned, we do have very strong contract positions on these players, and they are in the peak of their career. And it's been a while since we've had top quality players play with us in their peak. We've had players kind of past their peak come in and do well for us for a year or two, and then we've had players obviously we bring in young, and then as they peak, we're selling them into Europe and into England and whatever. So it was just a wee thought experiment. I kind of took myself down, and I just wanted to. But no, I make your everything you say. I totally agree with as well.
Yeah, good player, good quality player, and we'll just see how that one goes. That leads us on to the Giakoumakis chat. We touched on that last week. I don't think you were actually on at the time when we were talking about it, Quinny.
I listened back. It was a good listen.
Who do you think at this point in time, getting into this second part of the season, is Celtic's number one striker? And if Cho comes in, I'm going to stick with that just in case I get his surname pronunciation wrongly. What do you think that? What type of situations do you think that creates for Cho Gue and Giakoumakis if we bring in a player who has got great goal scoring form in the K-League and has just appeared for his country at the World Cup?
He is. I was kind of just looking through his stat. I've got them on screen now again, but he's not a player I'm really that familiar with. But yeah, he definitely is a guy that knows where the back of the net is. And he plays for a good team as well. A team that is one of the better ones in the K-League. John Bookmortars. I think they played Champions League as well at their level. But I think the number one striker for Celtic now is Kyogo in the manager's eyes and in the tactics for the pitch. I think the manager's kind of set out with the last couple of games. I think the best front three that we've got now is Jota, Kyogo and Haksabanovic, which does throw out a lot of questions, not just for Giakoumakis, of course, but another World Cup hero, Daisen Maeda, and obviously everyone's favourite wonder kid, Liel Abada.
Yep. Well, Abada, is a really interesting one because we know how many goals he's scored for us since coming in.
It's incredible.
And it's incredible how much talent we've actually got up front because, as you say, I would agree in terms of Haksabanovic, Jota and Kyogo for me. But as a kind of flipper, you then add Maeda, Abada, Giakoumakis in it, and it's like, what do you do with all these players? Manager obviously knows what to do with all these players. But, for Giakoumakis, again, when you're putting bits of jigsaw together, does, an arrival of a career Republic striker who's just played at the World Cup, who's second top goal scorer in his league, signal that he's probably going to be another one that goes out the door either in January or the summertime?
Well, I do find it surprising because, I was listening back to you and Johnny talking, whenever I've heard Giakoumakis talk about Celtic, similar to Jens, they love the place. You can really tell that they love Celtic and they're really happy to be here. And the impression I've always had from Giakoumakis isn't that he's kind of peaked late in his career and this is his last payday or whatever. I think he's kind of sees this as his big stage of his career, his big chapter. He's going to be a Champions League striker for Celtic and get into the Greece team and do all that kind of stuff. But if, wages can't get agreed and if another team comes in for him, equally, I do think that he still has in his mind probably for his own career, this is the chapter where I write the story, where I have the success I'm going to have. I'm in the form of my life. I'm in peak condition. My profile's never been stronger. So there is a little bit of that as well, I suppose, where he will need to make the best call for him. And similar to Turnbull in some respects, and I'm sorry for going all over the place as usual, but like these guys will kind of know in their heads by now, because we all think that they're second fiddle, that they're second in the pecking order to Rio Hatate, to Kyogo, to whoever else it might be. And for a player that's at that point, they're at the peak of their career, the peak of their everything, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Absolutely. And as you say, it might look rosy in the garden or whatever, and that you might think, yep, they're quite happy just being part of the squad. But if they want to get that game time, you're maybe looking at Giakoumakis, who's been interesting. People have been saying with how late he came in from VVV Venlo, that it was probably a sticking point then coming into the club at first. He's came in, he wasn't first choice. It took a while for him to get up to speed. It wasn't really until after January he really kicked on and became a big player, a real key important player in us winning that league title last season. But if there is any doubt, probably from the manager's part, that he's not completely in this, I don't think that's something that Ange Postecoglou is going to let hinder the dressing room at this point in time, which is something we'd maybe have in previous seasons, Quinny. But again, It's so good that due to the planning we've had in place last summer and beyond, to get guys tied down to long-term contracts, the two guys we've just brought in, and Johnson and Kobayashi, who we've not even spoken about yet, are again in 4 or 5 year deals, which is incredible, because it means that when you come to a point like this, if there's an issue in renewal or whatever with a player, the ball's in your court and you decide what happens. It's not the player can just throw the toys out the pram, spit the dummy out, and that's it. Because at this point in time, if Juranovic or Giakoumakis were to do that, they won't do that. Celtic can just say, well, you've got 3 years to sit there. So I think that really says testament to the planning that's been in place from the manager's part to hand out those big contracts.
Yeah, for sure. And I really think that when you go through the whole squad as well, and like you say, there's players we've not even got the ability to touch on because there's just so much going on at the moment, that when this team really does start to click in, and we all heard when Ange came in, Ange's a second season guy. Well, he's never been at a club as big as us, and he's never had as much firepower in the transfer market or as big of a network and access to resources as he's had. So maybe Ange at Celtic is actually going to be a season 3 thing, where it is which is an exciting thing to think about, that there's even another kind of kick up of on pitch, kind of deliverables that we could expect to see, because every area of the pitch is so well recruited for, so well, and like you say, the contract situation as well as the harmony through the squad, even the ones that Jens, will we keep him or not, he's not determined on that. Giakoumakis, is he going or not? And even Juranovic, we've seen after they knocked out Japan, him and Maeda having a wee cuddle and all that, after the game. So even if guys are maybe going to be moving out, we're not getting guys that are causing a stink or are going to drag the team down or anything, because there's probably too much respect for the manager and the situation that we have put them into, because we're the one that's given them the stage. And like you say with Giakoumakis, I speak to people that follow Dutch football super closely, and when Giakoumakis was coming to us, they were saying PSV didn't go anywhere near him, Feyenoord didn't go anywhere near him, and Ajax didn't go anywhere near him. They just weren't interested in him because his style of play didn't suit them. And if you're going to be the top if you're the top goal scorer in the Eredivisie, and the top 3 clubs aren't interested in you because they're well recruited in that position and stylistically you don't fit, to the outside market, that's a pure negative thing. And we're the ones that spent the money and took the chance on him when he didn't have a pre-season and he didn't have lots of teams knocking his door down. So I do think he has a bit of that in his mind still as well, because that won't be lost on him. But again, equally, it is one of those ones that you then come to Scotland, and I think, he got 12 or 13 goals last year. I'm pretty sure technically he was top goal scorer again or something like that, joint or something. So he's kind of proved it again twice. So maybe this time around more offers come in for him, and or different teams have shown interest that kind of reserved their interest beforehand. And maybe, I say maybe that's the way out for Giakoumakis is big. But again, I don't see there being millions of suitors coming for him either. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is somebody again that we do sign a new contract with and we keep him till he's 31, 32.
It's one, again, that feeds into that player trading model, Quinny. As you say there might be that bit he said that he's thinking, Celtic's gave me this opportunity after many other clubs didn't touch me, after being top goal scorer in, a fairly decent league. I know it's not one of the top 5 leagues in Europe.
Top 8,
but
easy.
It's a good league. There's good teams in there. We know that the strengths of your Ajaxes and Feyenoords and PSV Eindhovens and whatever else. That might be at the back of his mind, but there may also be, how much game time am I getting here? Just as you were saying with guys like Turnbull and whatever, are they happy to be rotating players? If they're not, I don't think the manager's going to allow them to stew and cause any issue in the dressing room. I don't think the Giakoumakis and Turnbull, I would hope they're not in that kind of mentality that they would cause an issue in the dressing room. But if there is that, they will be shifted out the door. But again, it talks about the reach of this Celtic recruitment strategy that you've probably looked at that Cho before he's went to the World Cup, which is when a lot of teams might have then, oh, who's this guy playing for South Korea? But now, hopefully Celtic's had some kind of plan in place, or maybe made the right moves before the World Cup, that you're not getting that inflated price tag, and it looks as if he is going to be making that move to Europe, and wherever he's going is going to be announced soon by the comments of his father. His father was talking in the press after, obviously, they went out the World Cup, was talking about how proud he was of him, and that he is going to be moving to Europe, which would probably indicate, with everything that's been reported around it, that we're going to bring him in. But again, it does talk to the global reach of Ange Postecoglou's scouting system at Celtic just now.
For sure. The only caution I would throw out there, and again, most football fans will probably be familiar with this to some extent, but like Korean players need to do military service at some point, and they are like gone, unless they win. Like Hyung-Sun Min got excused from it, and so did that whole squad when they won. I think they won the AFC Cup, like their equivalent of the Euros, basically. So I think sometimes that's a wee bit like the Japanese market, I think, like gets overlooked because people underrate it. But I do think partly sometimes the issue with Korea is sometimes clubs can be quite just scared of that kind of thing, But this guy is 24, and yeah, I think he's, I don't know. There's a team as well that sometimes when these guys are on military service, there's a team they play for when they're doing military service, and I'm not sure if that's Gimchin, because I think that's who he was playing with before Jeonbuk. And sometimes that's the case where they loan them to a military team. Sorry for the babbling, but I think, this guy could definitely come in as like a number 3 into this kind of mold as well, because like we've spoke about before, in different situations, whether it be next season in Champions League or next season when, we're running back into 4 competitions on 4 different levels, like maybe some guys get injured, maybe some guys get suspended, there's so many unforeseen things that can happen. And like the way that we're built everywhere else, we do need another striker of some description. This is a much better caliber of a striker than I would have maybe given us credit for going out and getting for a number 3 spot. But yeah, I think upside is huge. And again, I think the Asian lads that we've brought in so far, they've all got that self-awareness enough to know that, seasonality of it all. They've just finished a full season, and then when they're coming over here, there's acclimatization to do. You've then got to kind of bed in with a new team and gel. So there's no real rush. Whereas sometimes when you get a new signing in, particularly from within Europe, from us and probably from the player themselves, there's a bit of a urgency. When am I going to get minutes? When am I going to start playing? Whereas some of these guys are probably happy and willing to be a bit more patient and bed in correctly, which is nice.
Yeah. And hopefully they get the chance to do that. Obviously, some of the guys that arrived in January last year were just thrown right in at the deep end. Just due to international fixtures, if you remember right, Quinny, that I think Kyogo was one who we had to go out. Dyson might have been another one. He was actually, because I remember Dyson returned back and he was on the bench for the Derby game, but he didn't make it. And actually Kyogo was out injured at that point in time, but he would have been one who was likely away. But as you say, there's a lot to factor in it. Again, that kind of, it tells you a lot about Celtic, in this past 18 months, if you want to call it that players have arrived from so many different countries across the world, and they've settled in so well. And that's all about the culture that the manager's created at the club, that when anybody comes in, they're welcomed with open arms by Callum McGregor, some of the senior players, your Joe Harts and whatever else, and they settle in right away. There's not really any, I know people will throw names like Yusuke Ideguchi at you and whatever else, but he's not causing any issue as far as we know in the dressing room. It's just not really happened for him. Possibly through no fault of his own, in terms of injuries and whatever else he's picked up. But everybody else who's arrived, thinking of players who are coming, from Japan and whatever else, it's a long distance away from home and whatever else. They've acclimatised to Scotland, to the Scottish football, which can be very tough at times. It can be brutal, and we know that. But for Gue-sung, it's an opportunity as well, that he's already an established international player, But to really stamp as authority in that, Celtic, I think, gives you an opportunity to do now, which links back to what we were talking earlier, the 4 players getting to the last 16 of the World Cup. Just looking at those 4 guys, Cameron Carter-Vickers wasn't always in and around that US squad. There he's picked for the World Cup. Maeda gets a nod. I know Hatate hadn't picked up a cap for Japan before he came to Celtic. And O'Reilly wasn't too far away from Denmark. And we'll add Jota into that conversation, getting on that provisional list. So, I think Scottish football, even as a whole, Quinn, is creating that kind of stepping stone, whatever you want to call it, platform to go and get noticed by your international team. If you look at the boys at Hearts, St Mirren, Dundee United too.
Yep.
But it's an opportunity, I think, for Gue-sung to come to Europe and again get that bit of experience under his belt that he might need. It's back to a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago when you were talking about possibly coming to Celtic and taking those scalps first before you move on. But again, having been World Cup experienced, he's got that in his locker now and he can come in and hopefully add something to their attack if we're back in the Champions League next season, because that's been everybody's, that was everybody's biggest concern after those games with the chances that we created, that they wanted somebody to finish off the chances. It would be great if he's a guy to do so.
Yeah, totally. And again, like this guy's been playing. This isn't as much of a prospect as maybe. Yeah, that's what I was kind of meaning earlier on. Is like, after fought for number 3, it is maybe somebody that's a wee bit like Bernabe. Bernabe was, how many appearances did he have before we signed him? He didn't actually have that many in Argentina. It was like it was about a dozen or so. But this guy's got an actual track record. He's got goals, it's proven at this stage, like 20 goals and 5 assists in his last 30 matches or so. Phenomenal statistics, so if there's any sort of translation for that over at Scotland, and if it's like when he comes over here in the short path of the season he has, if he gets some sort of goals kind of flowing through, like then it's a great situation. And again, like as we're talking about it, I'm thinking the manager is always quite quick to emphasize that he wants to have plenty of options and plenty of versatility available. And if you think about, if we did want to play like with a real power forward, I feel like in the centre forward position, we are reliant on Giakoumakis. And what if something happened to him? What if, he was injured or he was suspended or something? Mm-hmm. Then if the manager really wanted to play that way against a team, then we are no longer able to. If Kyogo was out, you could play Maeda in the Kyogo role. So you've got a wee bit of provisional cover for that.
He's doing it for Japan, hasn't he?
Yeah, and maybe to a lesser extent, Haksabanovic or something else, who knows. But as I say, if Giakoumakis is not available, let's say Giakoumakis signs on, we keep him and we sign this guy, then it means like the manager's got that double insurance of knowing, if I want to play with this type of striker against this type of opponent, then there's every chance that we're going to be able to do that now. And then even if someone does come in for GG, you're not caught with your pants down, in that sense, you've still got the guy there.
That's it, and that's all about being active in the market rather than reactive in the market. We're not waiting until somebody goes out the door to bring in a replacement, and even kind of closing that summer window there, Quinny. I would have preferred if we had 3 strikers, just because there's always, you do touch on there that you've got Maeda there, Haksabanovic, can play in that 10, whether they can play up top himself is another question.
Yeah.
People have fancied Abada to play that role. We know he did it up in, I think up at St Johnstone, Boxing Day last year, but you'd rather that you've got cover in that position. It was probably the position for me that we didn't have cover in. If GG goes and we bring in Cho, I'd probably like us again to go back to a striker in the summer to try and bring one in. I just feel a lot more confident when you've got 3 strikers at the club, just so you've got that. One, you get the rotation, and 2, you can cope with any injuries that come your way, because one striker goes out, you're left with one. And I think if you remember back, Quinny, going back to the first treble that we won under Brendan Rodgers, we ended up playing Scott Sinclair the latter part of that season as a striker. He scored a hat-trick at Tynecastle, if you remember right, just due to the numbers that we had. I think we played Roberts and Forrest in either wing with Sinclair up top. So you don't want to get yourself to that situation again. So that will move us on from transfers. Just kind of actually briefly, but we've not spoken about Alistair Johnson. Another one in. We knew it was going to happen. If you haven't checked out our interview on Seltzer here with Peter Galindo, it is there on our YouTube. It's a decent watch, if I do say so myself. I learned a lot from it. And just really good insight from him, who knows Johnson quite well from playing in the MLS and for the Canadian national team. Again, like Gue-sung, he is experienced international, Quinny. He's playing a lot of football too. You're bringing in players who are first team ready. It's not maybe a Bernabei signing or a Moy who you're saying, yep, only going to be ready for the second half of the season. He's ready
Yeah.
to come in January and make an impact. So it's another good signing. Whether it means Jura's on his way out, we don't know. But again, it just adds something else to your defence and maybe gives you other options in terms of the system when we can play in the right side of a back three. I mean, he likes to play a wing back role. So again, delighted with that bit of business. I'm sure you are too, Quinny. And again, it's it was just the first week of December. Not even a turkey's been carved yet, and we've made 2 signings.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And maybe the Cho guy's got a great profile and everything as well. But after we signed Alistair Johnston, I was quite hopeful that the next signing we're going to get, because surely the next signing is striker number 3 or some sort of other like dynamic playmaker, attacking midfielder, like somebody that has some real kind of stardust around them. And I was hopeful we might have went back to MLS to go and get somebody like that, because there's a lot of great, particularly South American prospects in that league that are kind of itching to move to Europe. So. So yeah, I'm very excited about the Alistair Johnston move for him individually. Like listening to his interviews and stuff like that, it sounds like he's going to have hundreds of friends and family come to the stadiums to watch him every week and stuff like that. And I'm sure he's going to be quite similar to Ralston in that vein of bleeding green and white when he's on the pitch for us. So yeah, I think that's a great addition in that respect. But the kind of the enhancement in the transfer links between Celtic and MLS, because MLS, like again, for anyone that's not totally au fait with all this stuff, but MLS is basically the entity you're dealing with. You're not really dealing with Montreal for the most part. You kind of deal with MLS and then Montreal. That's kind of the way that whole system works over there. So that's why previously we've sold some players over there. Because anyway, so it's good, just good to see that relationship kind of strengthen. And I say, hopefully, when we are going to try and get some sort of maverick, some sort of attacking player, then maybe it's MLS we're shopping in next, is what I'm hoping for as a result of this.
Yeah, and one of the other big pieces of news since we've been last on was last Friday. Obviously, it was announced that Peter Lawwell would be returning to Celtic as non-executive chairman. Quinny, what's your thoughts on this? I think but Peter Lawwell departed Celtic, he departed under a cloud of, real fan unrest. People were not happy with the situation that had been created at the club. We had imploded. We pressed the self-destruct button. There was protests outside the ground. People weren't happy with how long Neil Lennon had been kept on as manager of the football club and whatever else. That was one part of, years of dominance under Peter Lawwell's watch. I know he's a figure who divides opinion within the Celtic support. I think firstly to touch on this is how it was announced, Quinny, which I think is one of the biggest gripes of people at this point in time. They didn't really sit on any of the social media channels and Twitter or Facebook. It simply came out in the website. Yeah. It's probably because the club knew what kind of reaction they were going to get. But when you need to do that, does that not maybe indicate to you that the decision to do it isn't the best in terms of what reaction you're going to get off of fans?
It's a wee bit damned if you do, damned if you don't, because, we would probably come down on them harder if they did a welcome back to the club, Peter, kind of tweet, people would probably lose their mind over that kind of thing, so I think, yeah, it's quite a difficult one. For me personally, like I'm definitely not up to speed enough on the track record of every sort of transgression Peter Lawwell has had over his tenure at Celtic. But for me, in terms of what happens in the boardroom, being like an armchair fan, I feel like I've always thought the guy has decent enough ambition, but he's just maybe not had good execution or had good decision making around it. He always tries to align Celtic with the biggest and best in Europe, and there, there's some positive things, but I think he's maybe been misguided or just had bad decisions. So if he's in a non-executive role, then I've heard other kind of fan media talking about this, and hopefully the kind of plan with that is you get the best of him without the worst of him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take out of, what you've just said there, Quinny. It was Peter Lawwell that brought Ange Postecoglou to the club. I know people right away will say the flip side of that, but he created the mess of the 10 seasons, so it was only right he did that. He departed on, good terms of bringing Ange to Celtic. And again, for me in this situation, I don't think that Peter Lawwell's ever really left Celtic. He brought Ange Postecoglou to the club. As far as I know, both people have a very good relationship with each other. if Peter Lawwell had decided the next Celtic chief executive, I don't think it would have been Don Mackay. I think it would have been Michael Nicholson, who was almost a kind of ready-made replacement for him. He'd been working so closely with Peter since his arrival at the club since 2013. There's been a lot of praise in the direction of Michael Nicholson over the past season with how quickly Celtic's reacted in the transfer market. I know there was the Bernard Higgins stuff, which was put to bed eventually, and the club did the right thing on it, even though it shouldn't have got to that stage. They made the right decision. But on that, if he's already been working in the background and it's been plain sailing as it has been out with the Higgins stuff, I don't really have too much of an issue at this point in time. The issue will come if it's created, but it just doesn't need to be there. Working as we do just now, being active in the transfer market rather than being reactive in the transfer market, not buying project players. There's been so much, we know that Shved was definitely not a Brendan Rodgers signing. What of that is just down to Peter Lawwell knowing that Brendan Rodgers was going to depart the club and brought him in to have, a player in it, hopefully that the next manager would develop. I know people are saying, appointing any manager in the Shivers is very unprofessional too, and whatever else. There's so much to take out of this, but at this point in time for me, if it's been working okay in the background, fine, but the transparency on it could have been so much better from the club, because I know at the AGM, which I didn't attend, somebody got up and asked. I know that's not something that they can reveal, having not already spoken to the stock exchange at that point in time, but surely then, Quinny, in November time, they knew that Peter Lawwell would be appointed as Ian Bankier's successor as chairman, and you get that done before an AGM, because in any business, whether it's a football club, supermarket, media company, or whatever, you are accountable to your shareholders, and you should be transparent to them and hold an accountability to those who support you and have stakes in your club. And I thought that was quite poor that the club didn't do that.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of out of step with what you would normally expect. But again, I think they kind of know, because again as well, I only kind of get reminded of this within the last couple of days. That Peter Lawwell got stuff sent to his house and all that. It did get quite hairy, for a bit. And fair play to him after having had that, to publicly come back to the team. Because surely there must be a part of you that worries for your safety and all the rest of it. So I would suggest he's probably putting the club. I don't know, but he's definitely, he wants to be a part of the club as much as anything else. Probably his heart's involved in this. So, but again, as I say, I'm not close enough to the situation to really pass any much more of a comment than that on it, because I can't claim to know everything the guy's done and not done. But I would say definitely the only thing I definitely hold anger with him against is keeping Neil Lennon on. I thought Lennon was the right guy to come in when Rodgers left in the January, but I say the season, you should have, after that was locked up, go get the new guy. That was my take at the time. On all that.
I think a lot of people did think around that time. Anybody to come in and serious towards a league title like that, Neil Lennon was absolutely the right man. But even from my perspective on it, Quinny, having chatted to Neil Lennon, I got a good few times and whatever else, that there was always, I think, a worry for any Celtic fan at that point that going for something as big as 10 in a row is either boom or bust. And we know how that ended up, and you take a real risk with your reputation going into a season like that, because if it comes off, you're lauded, you sail away into the night on your horse or whatever,
Vim Janssen style.
Hero. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I remember at a point during that season, and people were talking about, bring back Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan just to the end of the season. I thought, no, don't do that, because it ruins reputations if you do something like that. It's better left untouched. And my opinion is always that anybody in football should try and go out in a high if they can. Billy McNeil did that in his last trophy, won the Scottish Cup as a player, 75 Scottish Cup final. Probably could have played on for a wee bit longer, but left as a winner. For Scott Brown, it's a shame that the circumstances that he departed the club in, it would have been much nicer had you sent him into the sun after winning the Scottish Cup like Henrik did, or whatever. But it's just, do you think that this is possibly the chance that Peter Lawwell maybe sees that he's not happy with I don't doubt he's not happy with how it ended in that 10 season. And this is him wanting to come back and just correct a few wrongs. You know, right away, people will talk about Celtic's record in European football since 2004 in a knockout tie, which Peter Lawwell's overseen. Again, there's been great managers in that mix. Whether Gordon Strachan was managing a level below in Europe, had we maybe progressed then, I don't know. There's been good coaches that you see, you know, when Ronnie Dyler been his appointment, no doubt about it, that you see a coach there due to that link with the City group. And you see what he's trying to do. Brendan Rodgers, on paper at first, absolutely fantastic. We know how it turned out at the end. And, you know, there's been a good mix of managers in there, and it's worked well, but it's worked well when managers have been given full control. And it's imperative now that the situation with Ange Postecoglou doesn't change. If it's already been running for a 18 months or whatever, you just continue to let him do his own thing. And it's also interesting that in this case that you have Mark Lawwell in the building. Now, whether you're working in a pub, at a football club, in an office or wherever, father and son relationships in a workplace can be a bit, you know, I don't want to say dodgy, but you don't want each other to step in each other's toes, and that'll be something that Peter Lawwell's has not had to deal with before. That his son's in the building there, he's head of recruitment, and Mark Lawwell will want to carry out his remit to the best of his abilities, which again means that, you know, he can say, Dad, just take a step back and just leave me to it. I think that's probably something that has given me a wee bit more confidence in this, Quinny, that having Mark Lawwell's expertise in the building, won't want his dad involved in too many of his footballing decisions. I'm sure they'll chat to him about stuff and whatever else, but he'll just want to get on with his job.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And just listening to you there, like what I'm thinking as well is, like, if you think back to, like, you know, thinking about our European stuff from 2004 onwards, like, I was listening to that Sci-Fi interview with Martin O'Neill, which I'm sure many Celtic fans will probably listen to at this point. And quite early on, the words he says is that Dermot Desmond says to him, I want you to run the football club. And then Martin O'Neill's terminology thereafter is the same way he would ask someone to run a business for him, you know, like an idea, like a business manager almost. So that's probably the best, well, it is the best period in my lifetime for European football at Celtic. So we've had a guy in Martin O'Neill who has ran the club as being chief scout, football director, manager, all that stuff. And we know the condition that O'Neill left the club in, and I don't need to go into the wages and all that stuff, right? But from then after O'Neill, who do we have? We have, like, the likes of Strachan and Mowbray, all the rest of it. I don't think really the stage then becomes where we move into this modern stage of the club has talent ID, and these are the sort of places we buy players from, and these are the sort of players we've looked at for the last 3 years and we know something about, until Neil Lennon's first kind of time in the team. Because then from Lennon to Dyler to Rodgers, there has been some sort of coherent, maybe not coherent, but, you know, we are trying to shop, you know, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is maybe like just actual decision making and execution has been a bit off, you know. But I would say since Lennon's first tenure, that's probably the first time where the club has started to get wise to, we need people that work for us, that scout and make decisions and do this stuff. We can't rely on hiring Strachan, hiring an O'Neill, and they do everything, because when they leave, you're ghost. So if you think about it like that, we've only really been developing that kind of back end of the club, in my kind of loose opinion as I'm talking to you now, over the last, like, I don't know, what would that be then? 9 years or so? 10 years, give or take. So I don't think that's a bad progression strand from that point onwards. If you think about the point before that of being like the old age of football, where the manager was the king of the castle.
But I think we've kind of returned to that. And, you know, even under Brendan, Quinny, those signings were very specific in what he wanted to bring in, Adoris De Vries, Kolo Toure and whatever else.
Sure.
And to me, in the history of Celtic, it's always worked better when the managers had full control. It's just great that we've got a manager at this point that has that expertise of, you know, buying players from different leagues that works, and it's why we can then compete at that level. Because for a club of Celtic's size, absolutely, we should be competing with the best. But then when you start to strip it back and money and whatever else, you need to be wise to the system and how you can progress. We've seen other teams do it.
Totally.
And we want Celtic to do it ourselves. But, you know, I think it's interesting that Mark Lawwell's now in that building, and what prominence that has, because that's a completely different situation than was there before. I have absolutely no doubt that with Ronnie Dyler, players such as Guidetti, Denier, Frimpong, who all came up. There's been a Mark Lawwell connection in that there. He's now a Celtic employee. He's had a close relationship before with fans at Yokohama. He will want to get on with his job. And as non-executive chairman, just to actually talk about that role itself, Ian Bankier, since his appointment as chairman, wasn't too visible really in and around the club. On a match day, he's there in the boardroom, he turns up with his suit on. At AGMs, he's there, and whatever else. But apart from that, he'll turn up at events, he'll chat, and that's it. And I wouldn't imagine that Ian Bankier was in the building all too much at Celtic Park. It's not like back in the day when you've got somebody like Sir Robert Kelly who's dominating the football club, the chairman's role. It's changed, but we've had powerful figures in there before, and Brian Quinn and John Reid. But now, I would say Ian Bankier changed the role. Some would maybe say for the better in terms of, such a powerful character and individual as Peter Lawwell coming back in, that he needs to, possibly follow that role of Bankier, and that they're not too hands-on. They're very let the chief executive do his job. And again, that's why it is imperative for me at this stage in time that when Peter Lawwell comes back in January, I say back in, I don't really think he has ever left the club, that Mark Lawwell, Ange Postecoglou and Michael Nicholson continue to do their jobs to the best of their ability. There is no meddling, and we continue to move forward as a football club. I think that's what all of us want.
Yeah, I think the club's evolved into that stage now where it feels like we've got lots of great people doing they're applying their strengths in the right way. And what makes Ange so special is that he does have more than what we really should be getting from a manager. He does have a real good eye for a player. He does have a real great working knowledge of different transfer markets and connections, like you say with Michael and everything else. So yeah, it does feel like, as long as there's no major disruption on who's doing what, then we're in a great place.
Yeah, and again, there needs to be preparation put in place. I think it's, Mark Lawwell's appointment to me was right, because you take the surname out it, his expertise and whatever else in European football circles and with the City Group and has all those connections are important. And it's important that, whenever the day comes that Ange Postecoglou leaves Celtic Park, that there is succession in place, that, everything just flows nicely. You bring a new manager in, nothing changes with the scouting system, and you continue to do the same thing. You can't just be eggs into one basket and that's it. When he goes out the door, you're left with a lot of cracked eggs. You still want those eggs to be in the basket. So, as I say, it's now happened. The club will move on from it. It's just as long as everything as it has been running, with probably Peter Lawwell's influence in it somewhere, continues to run as it has, and I think we'll all be pretty happy with that. Just to kind of touch on a few wee things before we wrap up, Quinny. The team's out in Portugal, but you wouldn't really know they're in Portugal, just due to the silence on it, which I think is a good thing actually, because the players get that wee bit of downtime. They're used to wondering about Glasgow and getting stopped with people and whatever else. I know the game against Rennes is going to be behind closed doors. But I'm expecting, it's not been announced yet if it's going to be live or whatever else, but I'm expecting the manager to probably start with a team fairly similar to what he's going to go with at Pittodrie the following week. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't be surprised to see that team at some stage on the pitch, whether it be from the beginning or from the bench. But yeah, no, it has been all quiet on the Western Front, as it were. The thing that keeps putting me off about the Aberdeen game is the same day as the World Cup. I think it's the third place playoff, or something like that. So it keeps on
Don't worry about that.
It's not. I know, but it's just the way all the fixtures I've got lined up. It's just it always keeps catching me out. It's a 12:30 kickoff as well on that day. But yeah, it's on the 17th as we're recording this, and now it's the 8th. So I think the manager will have some semblance of the Aberdeen team player in, because that is only a week away, and you would at least want them to get an hour or half an hour or something, you would imagine, at this stage of the winter break thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be exciting to see Celtic back in action. We've not seen them since they played down under, but it'll be a good test. Rennes a decent team. We've came up against them in recent years in the Europa League. We know their capabilities, so a good test, and it's also good for the team to get away or that squad bonding and whatever else. And it'll be nice that obviously I think Kobayashi will have travelled out with the team there. I don't know what the situation is with Johnson just now and the other guys, were able head there to meet up with them, or just head straight to Celtic Park, to Lennoxtown. Sorry, obviously Johnson and Kobayashi won't be able to feature until January. But again, what you were saying earlier, Quinny, you want players to come in and try and bed into the team, and this is a good chance for those guys to do that. Last 5 minutes, couple of wee points. Reading today, VAR. Again, I think we liked it. All the controversy around it wasn't centred in the league or around ourselves. It was at the World Cup. But Scottish Cup, it's been confirmed that that VAR will only be used with the top flight teams if their games are on television. And if the other top flight teams want to use VAR, they're going to have to pay money. So that's a report that's came out today. You're putting your hands in your head. I don't blame you. Unbelievable, Quinny. And again, it just speaks volumes of the preparation and the thought that's went into this. That it was introduced into Scottish football at the end of October, but we saw it cause complete havoc for weeks with penalties and whatever else. And now we've got this. And again, it's not going to affect Celtic because it's very likely that Celtic Morton's going to be on via Play Sports.
Yeah.
But, Darvel against Aberdeen is not going to have it because Darvel's not in the top league. And it gives teams either an advantage or a disadvantage. And it means that there's no consistency running through, which was the argument that both you and I were making, that VAR, if it was ready to go, introduce it before the World Cup. That's what happened. It shouldn't have the teething problems that other countries have had because you've watched them and let them learn their lessons from it. So already draw those lessons. But now you've got a situation where you've got a technology that's only going to be used in certain games and not others in the one competition, which is baffling. Can you imagine around SPFL fixtures when we come back in December and 6 games, out of 6 games, you've got 3 teams with VAR and 3 without? No chance that would happen. So why is that the case in the Scottish Cup? For me in this, Quinny, I want your opinion on it. It's either every game gets VAR in the Scottish Cup or no game gets VAR in the Scottish Cup. Would you agree with that?
Completely. It's integrity of the competition. That's what we were talking about with the introduction of VAR, like in the first place, because it was meant to be at the halfway point of the season and then they brought it in a third of the way through the season. But to have it on some games and not, like Darvel v Aberdeen, I think it's just an hilarious fixture to talk about VAR for in general. But it should be all or nothing. Like if you can't do it everywhere, then no one gets it. That should be the way it goes. Because it's only, it's like, for maybe anyone who doesn't know, I did a fair bit of coaching and whatever. And when you do like amateur football, for example, you've always got a referee. But then when you go up a level, you've then always got linesmen. And that's like the rules of the competition, for example, And if you show up one day and there's no ref, it's not as if you go, all right, we'll just play this one game with no ref and don't worry about it. Oh, yeah. And it doesn't matter that nobody gets sent off or what, It's just like, what's going on? Like, these are the rules of the competition. These are the rules that everyone plays with. These are the way we're going to officiate it. And yeah, for me, it's all or nothing quite clearly. And it just highlights, everything you're saying there, like the absolute farce of deployment that this has been from start to finish.
Absolutely, it has been a farce of deployment, and it's always becoming even more clear, Quinny. It's amazing to think back. It seems so long ago that we played that Wednesday evening fixture at Fir Park and the goal get chopped off for offside. The camera that's closer to Celtic Park than it is to actual Fir Park.
I just banished that from my memory.
That was the second last game before we went away. So, the problem's not been solved. And with stuff like that, to me at this point in time, what it's shown is that we just weren't ready for the technology. I think people had hoped that when it would come in, it would transform it. It's made things worse. And the same, I will say it again on here, the same incompetent people are still using it. And if you can't have, I think at the time the SFA almost blamed Motherwell for the camera positioning, whereas Motherwell hit back and said, no, you choose the images that are shown and broadcasted. So to me, just another one to add into the farce, Quinny, isn't it? It really is just baffling. That will do us for today. I was trying to get the other Scottish Cup fixtures up there to see. Yep, there it's there. So you've got games like Alloa versus Falkirk, Arbroath Motherwell, Cove versus Ayr, ourselves versus Morton, Dundee United, University of Stirling, Elgin Drumchapel, Hamilton Ross County. So Hamilton Ross County involving a Premiership team, no VAR, But if you take something, I'm trying to think. They're Dundee United University of Stirling VAR, unbelievable. So there's an example.
Is it Dundee United against Stirling Uni?
Yes, and the thing is,
that'd be a great game.
there will only be VAR in that game if Dundee United are willing to pay for it. So again, it's adding cost to clubs. Anyway, that's a rant and VAR done. We'll be back next week for all our usual listeners on here. Again, thank you for all your support, for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't done so already, please do. But we're noticing that we're getting a usual kind of crowd on here, so that's good. Please do comment under the channel and give us your thoughts, give us any ideas that you might have. And we'll be back next week. We'll be preparing for that return of Celtic, Quinny, but we can't wait for it, Petodi. So, as always, Quinny, thanks for joining me. And to all our usual listeners, watchers, thanks for watching and listening to the Celts Are Here weekly flagship